Asking Corlia, for more than a year now, households have struggled with that cost of living crisis, and for many households, the biggest single expense that they have faced is servicing their mortgage and keeping a roof over their head. In the past 15 months, the ECB have increased its key interest rate 10 times, and we all know the reason for this, but we can't ignore the impact that this is having on workers and families and households right across the state. In the past 15 months, mortgage interest costs have increased by a massive 54%. And before the recent hike that was announced earlier this month, the central bank estimated that 1 in 5 households, 20% of all households, would see their annual mortgage costs increase by more than €5,700 compared to last year. They estimated a further 1 in 3 households would see their annual mortgage costs rise by over €3,000, and a further 1 in 3 households seeing their annual mortgage costs rise by over €1,500. And these are massive, massive income shocks for middle and low-income households across the state. And there are more, as we know, than 80,000 households who've had their mortgage sold off to vulture funds without their consent, sales that were supported at the time by Gael and Fianna Fáil through the blocking of my legislation. Those households were told by the Taoiseach that they would be no worse off once their mortgages were sold. And as I warned at the time, the sale of mortgages to vulture funds would leave those households exposed to higher interest rates, and that, unfortunately, has come to pass. These mortgage prisoners, some of them are now paying interest rates as high as 10%. On the 4th of August, I called on the Minister for Finance to convene a meeting of the Central Bank and the banking sector to chart a pathway for these mortgage holders to return to the mainstream mortgage market. The Minister convened that meeting later that month on the 31st of August, but I have serious reservation about the effectiveness of the measures that were announced. Their mortgages should never have been sold in the first place. What is clear now is that struggling households need action, and they need it now. So for months, Sinn Féin have been calling for the government to act, for the government to get their head out of the sand, for the government to introduce targeted and temporary mortgage interest relief. And that's exactly what this motion calls for Sinn Féin's plan to support these struggling mortgage holders to be introduced. And our plan would support households with 30% of their increased costs since June of 2022. With it capped at a maximum benefit of €1,500 per household that qualifies over the course of the scheme. The plan wouldn't insulate households from the full impact of rising interest rates, but it would provide relief and support to those facing what is a massive income shock, and our plan is affordable. More importantly, it is necessary. So we're now in a situation where retail banks are expected to make combined operating profits of over €5 billion this year, profits that are expected to double compared to last year. And in that context, the banking levy should be increased, and the proceeds could and should be used to support struggling households. So, Liaskin Corley, this is a sensible proposal. It is a necessary proposal. It is one that can be delivered, and it is one that deserves meaningful support from all sections in this House. I am disappointed, but not surprised, that the government again continue to ignore the plight of mortgage holders and will vote against this motion. I ask the Minister for Finance, when will he understand what is happening out there and the fact that he needs to act? He has delayed far too long.
Minister, do you know the fear that many people felt last July when the first mortgage interest hike was announced? And can you imagine the fear they felt last week when the 10th mortgage interest rate was announced? These are families who are struggling and they're waiting on you, Minister. A man contacted me who lives in Cork. His current mortgage interest rate is double what it was 18 months ago. And he said, I am hoping Cork politicians will talk to Minister McGrath, you, Minister, and get him to see sense and tackle the banks while helping mortgage holders who are sinking fast with every new bill that's coming in. Only Pierce Doherty is standing up for us. That's his words, not mine. You're telling people to wait for the budget. They've been waiting over a year. They need this government to support them now. They need help, Minister. Many people have struggled with all these interest rate hikes, and now they're looking at a winter with unaffordable mortgages, unaffordable electricity and gas bills, unaffordable food prices, and where is the help? And you know what they've said to me? Hard-working people and families have said to me, They got an education, they went to college, they got an apprenticeship, they became an entrepreneur. They've done everything right. They've worked every hour that God sends. And the one time they need help, this government has failed them and has failed to step up. Minister, where is the help for all the hard-working people in this country who get up every day? Those famous lines by the Taoiseach who get up early in the morning. Because what they're telling me, what they're saying to me, Minister, is this government has forgotten about them. Like, do you understand how tough it is for people right now? And Minister, you'll probably dismiss Pierre Storty once again, like you did when he raised about the insurance companies ripping people off. You'll probably dismiss him again, like you did when he told you what was going to happen with the vulture funds. Well, I'm asking you now, Minister, listen to Pierre Storty, because this is common sense and it really supports the people who are struggling.
Minister, for months now we've been asking you to do the right thing by homeowners. These are the same homeowners that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael purport to support and to hold in high regard. And as each month goes on, people realise that these are just empty words. They are empty words, and lip service is being paid to these struggling mortgage holders who cannot afford to continue with the crippling rates that they're being charged. The 10 interest rate rises that they've had to experience, the huge income shock that these households have had. Now, in particular, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael saw off the selling of 78,000 mortgages to vulture funds. We know from the central bank that 22,000 of those weren't even in arrears. They never were in financial difficulty, and yet they were sold off without the consent of the homeowners. And for the last number of years, both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have supported EU legislation to empower vulture funds and to weaken the national government's ability to protect these same homeowners. Now, those same homeowners that were thrown to the vulture funds are being torn apart by these interest rates of up to 10%. We know from the central bank statistics again that the number of homeowners with the vulture funds paying over 6% has increased really drastically. You have the same information, Minister. You know how much they've increased by. It's about 19% in the last couple of months alone. And we cannot stand by, and this government cannot stand by and do nothing. We have outlined to you in terms of what needs to be done in terms of the retail banks taking back these mortgages. Again, we ask the same question today of the central bank. We need to know exactly how many, you know the criteria that's involved in taking these mortgages back again, but there seems to be obfuscation around all of this and just a do nothing to leave these homeowners to the wolves. What we are asking for is absolutely sensible. It's temporary, it's targeted, it's a mortgage relief. It's the same type of mortgage relief that Fianna Fáil supported previous to this, before they were in government. So this do-nothing approach cannot continue. We know that 52%, the mortgages that people are paying in this country is 52% higher than the average EU mortgage rate. So, Minister, I'm appealing to you, and I'm appealing to government, and appealing to the TDs in County Mayo to stand up for these homeowners who go month by month trying to find hundreds more every month just to meet the mortgages. We have control over what can be done here. It has to be done. We cannot continue on doing nothing.
There were 3 speakers down, but there was an extra 2 minutes 50, so it's up to yourselves.
Yes, I'm glad to be able to speak on this bill, on this PMB this evening, because there is so much pain behind the doors, the closed doors of North Kildare, and it was good to have that opportunity to focus completely on your constituency, really, up for the last couple of months. People living on ordinary wages, paying extraordinary mortgages for a standard home. I was talking to a woman this morning, Minister, a woman in her 50s who used to work full-time, and she's now working part-time because she can't afford the after-school childcare. It was more than her salary, and she simply couldn't afford to work full-time anymore. 10 rate rises on her high mortgage on an ordinary 3-bed semi in North Kildare has eaten up her part-time salary, leaving her effectively working for nothing. They have never missed a mortgage repayment so far, and now they're really worried about whether or not they will be able to keep up their repayments on their mortgage. With 3 kids still in school, they are terrified that they could lose their home. And she's heard me talking as well about the amount of people who are facing that predicament in North Kildare. For months we've been calling on you to do the right thing and to bring in time-limited interest relief on the rate rises while people are struggling. And they're really struggling, even with 2 wages coming into the house with the current crisis on the cost of living and energy prices. Coming out your front door now, like, you needn't bother doing that unless you've €50 in your pocket. Going into the supermarket, you'll be very lucky to get away, if you have any size of a family at all, to be able to get away with spending less than €100. Everything, it's money, money, money. Mortgages, uniforms, heating, electricity, the food shop, shoes, the doctor, and if you go to the dentist, you nearly need to get a credit union loan. People are getting hammered. They're hammered by all the things that they can't give up, the things that aren't luxuries: a roof over your head, food, heat, keeping your kids in clothes and indeed shoes that still fit them. I really wonder about this government, Minister. Is there some kind of social experiment that you're conducting on ordinary working people hammered by 10 interest rate increases? Are you seeing how long they can actually bear it, how much more they can take, how much more of this they can endure? Because that's what it feels like, and that's what people are telling me that they believe when I talk to the people across North Kildare who are working harder than ever but have less and less to show for it, because every penny is going on mortgage increases and the increase in the cost of living. For goodness sake, Minister, do the right thing and accept our PMB. Don't oppose our motion. Give people a hand with the rate increases, not another wallop. Because let me tell you, Minister, the people can't endure much more of this government.
Minister, we're here again after over a year now of continuous interest rate increases that people have had to try and bear with, and it's in the context of huge pressures in the cost of living across almost every sector. And whether it's people with fuel in their car or insurance or all the household needs that people have to pay for have gone up, 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 up. And one of the areas that government does have and can have an impact upon is the mortgage interest. There was mortgage interest relief schemes there before. They can be brought back again. It can be targeted. It can be limited. It can do exactly what it needs to do in order to give the people who are finding it most difficult a relief. And yet government continue to play politics with it and refuse to do it. Is it simply because the opposition are asking for it, I often wonder? And I noticed what I thought was going to be a road to Damascus turning last week, whether it was in Tipperary or where it was, but I'm not sure. But seemingly the road to Damascus turn didn't happen, because you're not going to do anything about it after all. And that's what we want to see. We want to see government, stepping up and recognising that people are really hurting here. They really are in trouble. It's costing them hundreds of euros a month more to pay the mortgage that they got. I had a family came to me in my constituency. They had a 30-year mortgage they got in 2009, and they're finding it difficult at this stage. They have children in college. They're at the period now where they need to get some relief. They can't manage. And they're saying, why isn't the government doing something for us? And these are the people, that we often talk about. They earn too much to get anything, to be able to afford or to be able to meet any of the criteria for any of the things that's been offered. And yet they're the ones that are working hardest, paying their tax, doing everything right. And when it comes to it, the ECB, for global reasons, which is about problems there is in regard to the inflationary measures in energy and oil and all of that, which is driving all of this inflation, for global reasons, they introduce an interest increase, who does it affect? Those very people. And that's the problem here, Minister. You need to recognise that it's actually your constituents, what was the former people that voted for Fianna Fáil for lifetimes, they're the ones that are coming to us saying, why is nothing been done? Why is this government letting us down? And you need to recognise that and do something for them. Not because we are telling you to do it, but because it's the right thing to do for the people out there that are suffering and suffering hard. Too many people are saying to us that this government has to go. This government needs to be changed because they don't listen to common sense. And that's exactly what you need to start doing, Minister. Recognise that there needs to be an ounce of common sense introduced into all of this. And this is an opportunity to do that. This motion that we're putting here tonight is to get you in the budget in a couple of weeks' time to introduce a package of mortgage interest relief for people who are most pressed and need that. So please, step up to the mark and recognise your responsibilities, not to government, not to anyone else, but to the ordinary people out there who are suffering hard.
Deputy Pat Daly.
Over the past year, 20% of households, Minister, have seen mortgage repayments increase by over 3,000 and another 20% by more than 5,700. Mortgage interest rates rose by over 54% in the last year, while the retail banking sector has almost doubled its profits to €5 billion. And this tallies with the experience of people that I spoke to this week in Kerry. In the last year, one couple with 2 children in college, their mortgage has increased by €600 per month. Another woman, a single parent, her mortgage went from €1,330 per month to €2,000 per month with a vulture fund. And this is in a county where disposable income consistently ranks below the national average, where people are struggling with cost of living, struggling with fuel costs, which have recently increased, and struggling with food prices. In a state where 30,000 people are in mortgage arrears and 78,000 mortgages are held by vulture funds, some on rates as high as 10%. This, of course, was all facilitated by the government. And remember 2 things: that the government has refused, despite being consistently asked, to introduce temporary targeted mortgage interest reliefs in order to deal with rising mortgage costs. And Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael supported a number of breaks for those vulture funds, supporting the sale of mortgages to vulture funds without the consent of mortgagors, giving vulture funds an exemption from stamp duty, and then other tax breaks on renting properties, exposing all the time struggling mortgage holders to higher interest rates. Big breaks for bad banks. And here's what the vulture funds are doing. Vulture fund is buying a mortgage of around, say, €200,000 from the mortgage of a local family from a departing bank for about 65,000, about 33% of the size of the loan. Then the vulture raises interest rate 10 times, and they link that rate to rises with it to the ECB rate. But more than likely, the funds, if they did borrowed at fraction of at high street rates. And in reality, although they are not linked to the ECB, they pass on every single rate, every rate rise, and offer no fixed rate to those struggling families. Tens of thousands of people, Minister, will not be able to meet the repayments. They will eventually sell, and the vulture fund will triple the money plus interest, or if they restructure, the vulture fund will eventually collect more. Consumer protection authorities say it's currently a divide and conquer strategy by the vulture funds, and there appears to people to be no regulation. Many will either sell up or be forced to seek local authority help. Anger is rising amongst these struggling families that the government is not regulating or assisting with mortgage interest relief. Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the Greens are increasingly out of touch with the many joining the swollen ranks of the working poor and are contemplating emigration. I support this motion. The government needs to intervene. We need action, and we need a rebalancing in favour of struggling families and away from vulture funds. You need to provide mortgage interest relief to principal residences equivalent to 30% of increased interest costs since June of 2022. You need to increase the banking levy to support households and develop a clear plan to help those people to reintegrate those mortgage holders with loans held by vulture funds into the mainstream mortgage market.
Patricia Ryan.
I'm eager to start this Dáil term by speaking to Sinn Féin's urgent and necessary motion for mortgage interest relief, and I thank my colleague Deputy Pearse Doherty for bringing this motion forward. We find ourselves at a critical juncture where the cost of living crisis has reached new heights, Minister, leaving families struggling in a web of escalating costs. Families are burdened with soaring mortgage costs escalated by 10 ECB interest rates in 14 months. The hikes of them are costing a fortune to people. According to the Central Statistics Office, mortgage interest costs have surged by 51.3% in the past year alone. And let us not forget those who have been doubly victimised with their mortgage sold to vulture funds, leaving them at the mercy of exorbitant interest rates, some as high as 10%. Sinn Féin has been advocating for months for a time-limited mortgage interest relief. And Minister, the time for action is now. Yet what course has this government chartered? A course of inaction. reducing the banking levy and therefore enriching financial institutions whose operating profits have soared by an astonishing 97% year on year. From my constituency office in County Kildare, the stories pour in. Tales of despair, of families struggling under the yoke of rising mortgage living costs, and in some cases, some who may soon be homeless. The government's lack of action is not merely disappointing, it's actually cruel. Sinn Féin's motion lays out a clear roadmap for immediate target intervention. Introduce mortgage interest relief tailored to assist struggling households. Increase the bank levy and apply proceeds directly into provision of mortgage interest relief. Develop a clear plan to help bring mortgages already in the hands of vulture funds back into mainstream mortgage market. This government has had more than ample opportunities to offer a lifeline to families ensnared in the cost of living quagmire. The era for token gestures, Minister, and half measures is long past. I urge you and this government to adopt the Sinn Féin mortgage interest relief plan and provide immediate relief to homeowners and their families. And I'll go even further and I implore the House to endorse this motion. And Minister, fluffy and all as your speech was, and how you got everything sorted and how you have it all wonderful, you'd not given me any confidence. And when you mentioned Pepper, I'm delighted to hear they're going to engage. I must contact them because they own my house.
Minister, people are struggling to pay their bills. They're struggling to pay for the basics. Luxuries are something that they look forward to in the future. But for now, it's about surviving from paycheck to paycheck. People who I've spoken to on the doors want you to introduce targeted temporary mortgage interest relief to support homeowners facing significant increases in their mortgages. They want fairness and they want a change. Sinn Féin have committed to mortgage interest relief for principal private residents equivalent to 30% of the increased interest rates relative to June 2022, with a maximum benefit per household of €1,500. Minister, what galls people is the massive increase in the bank profits. And the Irish Times wrote last week, with less than 2 months to the 15th anniversary of Brian Cowen's government being forced to guarantee the Irish banking system to prevent its collapse, the two largest surviving players in the market are making the types of profits last seen during the property boom. AIB last week that it said that its net profit jumped 79% to €854 million, turbocharged by the European Central Bank hiking official interest rates. Wasn't it a cracking deal for the private banking system all the same? Sinn Féin will increase the banking levy and we will use the proceeds of that to increase supports for households through the introduction of temporary and targeted mortgage interest relief. And lastly, the same banks that are making billions again through many of their former customers to the vultures, about 78,000 of its customers who are now paying exorbitant interest rates as high as 10%. Sinn Féin will commit to developing a clear plan to facilitate the reintegration of mortgage holders with loans held by vulture funds into the mainstream mortgage market. Minister, people say they want change, but unfortunately, if they were listening into this debate here and listening to your speech, unfortunately, they will realise you're not listening. Gura Magat.
The thing that strikes me about this debate is that the people who are most affected by this are some of the people that this government styles itself as being for them. The party of getting up early in the morning, the party of aspiration, the party of home ownership. This is how Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael style themselves. They seek to speak to the people who are affected by this. And yet these are the people who are being hit from absolutely every direction. They are facing enormous childcare bills, they have the voluntary contributions, they have childcare costs of €1,500, €1,800, maybe even €2,000, and they have mortgages such as this. And if you take a family look, we're from the same constituency, I'm sure we've potentially spoken to some of the same people who were affected by these increased mortgages. I'm not going to, I can think of examples. I was looking back on emails there of a woman in our constituency saw increases of €350 through Pepper. We'll just take a hypothetical example. You have somebody, the wife might be working in Striker, the husband could be working in the City Council, two good, decent, full-time, middle-income jobs, and they are at the same time paying €1,500 on childcare. They have all the costs that are involved, they have all the stress of life. Every month, the bills would be gone through and everything figured out, and you just find a tipping point, and then you're told that your mortgage is increasing by €300, €350 a month. If the state, if the Exchequer saw increased costs of that percentage, of that proportion, this place would be an absolute carnage, absolute chaos. There is no family that is prepared for an increase in costs like that, and it really puts people to the pin of their collar. I know you've come across this. I believe that, well, I hope that you are listening in relation to this. But clearly, the action thus far has not been anywhere near good enough. We need obviously, it has to be focused. It can't catch absolutely everything. If you try and prioritise everything, you will prioritise nothing. But it absolutely has to happen for those families who, and these are the same people who are, are asking themselves, I am doing everything right here. I am working full-time. I am trying to do the best I can for myself, my family. I've gone out, I've improved my education, my skills, my training, and yet I can't catch a break. So, Minister, I think it's vitally important in this budget that you follow the proposals that have been outlined or something like them and give those families a break.
Minister, the cost of living crisis has significant implications for all sections of society, but disproportionately for those who are economically disadvantaged, individuals and families who are already struggling to make ends meet. The escalating energy and food costs, increased mortgage rates and spiralling rents have contributed significantly to this ongoing crisis. Economically disadvantaged individuals are particularly vulnerable as they tend to bear the brunt of rising prices for essential goods and services. Low-income households in particular spend a higher proportion of their income on energy and food. Therefore, increase in these costs impacts their ability to maintain a decent standard of living. Such households may be forced to cut back on essential items or even go without them altogether. Some families may struggle with inadequate nutrition or health problems due to the inability to afford nutritious food or medical care. The impact is not merely financial, it affects their overall quality of life. The repeated increases in the main lending rates by the European Central Bank have resulted in exorbitant mortgage repayments for many people, with interest rates rising for some households up to 10%. These hikes will see some households pay up to an additional €5,700 in their annual mortgage costs. All variations of mortgages, whether tracker, variable or fixed rate, have all been greatly affected by these increases. These increases are causing financial strain, insecurity about the future and concern amongst families about making ends meet is taking a toll on a person's mental health. Escalating rents also make it increasingly difficult for individuals and families to secure affordable accommodations. Renters are trapped in a cycle of unaffordable rents, leaving them with little or no savings and perpetuating their economic vulnerability. Previous government assistance has provided temporary relief by helping to cover certain expenses, such as the once-off payment towards certain energy costs. But these are only stopgap solutions. Realistic long-term policies aimed at reducing energy costs and stabilising food prices are crucial. And while this is not happening, the cost of living crisis will continue to affect people's standard of living and their mental health. Sinn Féin has called for the introduction of a targeted and temporary mortgage interest relief, which would apply only to the principal dwelling homes and to new and existing mortgage agreements. It's time to give homeowners a break, and this measure will go some way to alleviate the acute financial distress that these rising interests are causing homeowners.
Count Corla, and I want to start by thanking Dr. Pearse Doherty for this motion this evening and for all of the work that he does and continues to do on behalf of mortgage holders. Earlier today, the Senior Minister told us that he had convened a meeting of stakeholders, and they told him that there is an increasing number of borrowers who are encountering difficulty in meeting their mortgage repayments. They also noted cases where borrowers are prioritising their mortgage payments, but that financial difficulties are arising in other areas because of this. They're very fancy words, but what do they actually mean? Because the truth behind the Minister's words, it's very, very, very grim. The financial difficulties that Minister McGrath was referring to have a human face. There are real families, real workers behind these words. They have tightened their belts. The belts couldn't get any tighter. There are no treats for the kids, no holidays. Savings are gone if they had any, no days out. They've shopped around, so you can tell Minister Fleming to stand down. They've taken that advice. If they had any savings, they're gone. So that's it, they are spent. They are literally petrified of the letter coming in the door from the bank. What they're cutting back on now is essentials. Minister, there are over 1,000 kids in my constituency left waiting for services from the CDNT. Every day that they wait, parents watch their kids fall further behind, fail to thrive and fail to meet their potential. I've met many worn out and distressed parents, but one really stood out for me recently. She told me that because of the failure of your government to provide her autistic daughter with any services whatsoever, she has been using her own money that she works hard for to subsidise your failing government to provide services for her daughter. But her mortgage has gone up 10 times now. She's cut everything. There was nothing left to cut. And she has had to cut the services that she provides, that your government fails to provide her autistic daughter with. She provides from her own pocket. She has had to cut that because she needs to keep a roof over their head. Because guess what? There's nowhere for them to go because of your housing crisis. Your housing crisis, your health crisis and the cost of living crisis are creasing these families. They have nowhere else to go. Don't make them wait, Minister. Withdraw your shameful counter-motion and support the Sinn Féin motion. Gormaigat.
Thanks, Cora. The situation we're in at the moment is that we have thousands of householders who are in serious arrears. I'm meeting mortgage holders across Lee Shoffley who are struggling. 21,400 is confirmed are in serious arrears, and serious arrears means exactly that. Tens of thousands more are in arrears. Some households are paying interest rates of 7, 8, 9%. One man I met at the Ploughing Championships paying almost 10% to a vulture fund. And repayments are rising by thousands of euros each year. And this is happening at the same time as the banks are making huge profits. The banks that we bailed out and the taxpayer bailed out. Record profits. AIB profits recorded at 1.2 billion in the first 6 months of 2023. We're also in the middle of a cost of living crisis with sharp increases in the cost of energy, transport and food. The Irish Times, and we wouldn't need the Irish Times to tell us this, walk into Dunnes Stores on Saturday morning or into any of the shops, Tesco's, any of the multiples you see it, reported recently that grocery inflation is up 11.5%, with Tesco publishing profits on their Irish operation just in this state, not in the north, just in this state, 120 million. We heard a lot of hot air from the government and ministers, including Minister Richmond, before the summer about bringing the supermarkets to heel. But what actually happened? Nothing happened. What's actually being done to clamp down on the price gouging by the supermarkets and the big multiples? And it's in this context of inflation and the cost of living rises that Deputy Pearse Doherty and Sinn Féin is calling for a targeted temporary mortgage interest relief scheme. We had mortgage interest relief in the past. Indeed, the current Minister for Finance called for it to be reintroduced just a few short years ago. It's a scheme to support struggling households, covering what we're proposing, covering 30% of the additional interest paid each month, up to a limit of 1,500. For example, a mortgage holder with an outstanding balance of 200,000 with 20 years left, who would have seen their interest rates go up from 2 to 4%, will now be paying for €100 a month extra. The scheme we're proposing will provide some relief for them, and will mean an extra €120 per month in their pocket, or 1,440 in a year. That can be the difference between able to survive from month to month or not. This relief would not apply to second homes, holiday homes or rental properties. It's only to primary residents, and that's very, very important, so it's targeted in that way. We developed these proposals in consultation with the Parliamentary Budget Office, and based on that analysis, it would cost in the region of, for 8 months, 400 million a full year, 600 million in a full year. And to conclude, this measure is sensible, it's affordable, it's costed as accurate as it can be, and it can be funded by increasing the banking levy and by a portion of the massive state projected surplus this year of in excess of 10 billion. Ministers, workers and families need real support, not empty promises, and they need it now. They are in serious difficulty.
And I want to thank all of the speakers who spoke today on this motion, and many of them referred to this is the third time that we've had a motion of this nature before the House, and Sinn Féin will continue to campaign, continue to put forward proposals that will provide relief for hard-pressed workers and families in the middle of a cost of living crisis, but very conscious that there are a portion of workers, a portion of people out there who are suffering as a result of different inflationary costs, whether it's food, whether it's energy, whether it's petrol or diesel, and it would be remiss of me to outline the shameful decision taken by government again on the 1st of September to increase the price of diesel and petrol, and planning to do so again on the 11th of October and again on the 31st of October, and hopefully they will see sense and not proceed with those increases, pushing petrol and diesel to it close, if not over €2. But there are many pressures that are pressing down on families, but the largest that many families have seen is the actual cost of maintaining a roof over their head in terms of mortgage interest. The central bank figures speak very clearly. 20% of mortgage holders, and there's over 700,000 people who pay their mortgage in this state, 20% of people will have seen an increase of €5,700 in the cost of servicing their mortgage compared to last year. That's €5,700 that hundreds of thousands of people will have seen an increase of. And what has the government done? They've done nothing. They've washed their hands of it, they've buried their heads in the sand, and they've basically told them, paddle your own canoe, because they have come up with nothing. Last year I stood in this very spot and I said, this is my proposal. If you don't like it, that's fine. Come up with your own proposal. There's many ways that you can cut and slice this. You can make it more targeted. You can look at the allowances. You can look at the caps. You can do many things. At least come to the table with nothing. All of the months have passed and the government have come up empty-handed. But what has happened in the meantime? Month after month, month after month, the interest rates have been increasing, automatically for tracker rate mortgages. In the next number of days, households across the state are going to get the 10th letter since July of last year indicating that their mortgage has increased again. 10 interest rate rises for those. The loans that the ministers across here sold to the vulture funds, clapped the banks while they were doing it and wouldn't prevent it happening. Those loans, many of them are paying 8, 9 and 10% now in interest rate in the hands of the vulture funds, and the government has done nothing. The first budget that this government, that Fine Gael introduced in 2012, you know what they did? They extended mortgage interest relief. Do you know what the level that was available at the time? 30%. Do you know how much relief you could claim? Up to 20,000 relief. Do you know what that means? People could benefit by the tune of €6,000 in terms of mortgage interest relief. Do you know what the ECB rate at the time was? 0.75%. It is 4.5% today. Do you know what Minister McGrath, the minister who's in charge of all of this, said in 2016? He said in 2016 general election, Fianna Fáil was the only party of which I am aware that campaigned on the basis of mortgage interest relief would be retained and provided for in budgetary and fiscal projections made at the time. I would have loved to have seen it retained at a rate of 100%, but this is the best that we could negotiate. And that was him talking about negotiating with Fine Gael to extend it for a couple of years. Do you know what the interest rate was in this state in 2016 when Minister McGrath, the Finance Minister, now said he would love to have it extended at 100%? It was zero. Zero. So at a time of interest rates of zero in Fianna Fáil's time, 0.75% in Fine Gael's time, you had no problem introducing mortgage interest relief that benefited people to the tunes of thousands of euro. We're talking in the middle of a cost of living crisis when interest rates at ECB level have never been as high, ever. And we're saying to take a targeted measure that only attempts to take on 30% of the increased interest and a maximum cap of €1,500. This is what is needed. Someday, hopefully, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil will wake up and understand where ordinary people are at. You are so out of touch, it is unbelievable that you cannot understand that people need support at this time during this cost of living crisis.